Hey, I'm back again. A little note about my surroundings. I don't know if you noticed. I'm in my laundry room. Yeah, you remember that room, one zone, Virginia Woolf concept? Yep, this is my room of my own right now, the only one available to me in my gigantic household. When I say gigantic household, I mean we have a lot of people that live here. Therefore, all the rooms are taken. Yeah, so here I am. Well, it's okay. It works. Anyway, we were talking about Zora Neale Hurston and about how she preferred to write about the triumphs of Black culture rather than the victimization of it. But that kind of approach to Black culture was not very popular at the time. And her politically libertarian views also were unpopular with the more socialist male literary public of the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. Even fellow African Americans like Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, and Langston Hughes, you may know those authors, really famous Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man, Langston Hughes, or just Invisible Man. Langston Hughes, of course, wrote tons of poems, including, Raisin in the Sun, um, Richard Wright, Native Son. Anyway, they criticized Zora's writings for not concentrating on the problems blacks faced. Even though Zora had been an active participant in the Great Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. So the Harlem Renaissance was, you know, huge during that time period where, Black culture was um, kind of had a nexus of incredible writers there in Harlem, New York, writers, painters, musicians, and it was like this rebirth of the community there. That's what Renaissance literally means, is rebirth. But I mean, it was just a flowering of literature and art and painting and music, jazz, all, singers, all of that. Very popular in the 1920s, also dovetailed with that, jazz age 1920s, you know, uh, went right hand in hand with it. And that kind of roaring 20s aspect, that the flapper and all those things are associated with. So she was very much in with that movement and very associated with it. Wrote things with Langston Hughes, but she later on was criticized for this, approach that she took to the Black experience, which is that she took it from a more optimistic point of view rather than um, a more um, victimized or uh, dim view of the hardships and things like that blacks face. She concentrated more on the triumphs. Her essays appeared then in numerous prestigious journals during the Harlem Renaissance, including the Saturday Evening Post. In 1931, she even performed it on Broadway at the New Yorker Theater in the play called Fast and Furious, which was a series of sketches, and Hurston helped write that show. However, as well as other authors. However, because her literary concerns were not the same as the rest of later America in her lifetime, Zora in later years could not support herself on her writing anymore. She started working as a maid even in Florida until one day her female boss found an old article of Zora's in the Saturday Evening Post. And she asked her, this is your name. Did you write this? And Zora said yes. Of course, I can only imagine how maybe humbled that person that Zora had cleaned for must have felt. Zora started freelancing again at this point, but not to much avail. Since she was evicted from her house and had to move into the St. Lucie County welfare home, where she died in poverty after only 3 months residence. Sadly, Zora was buried in an unmarked grave. Since then, Zora's works have been rediscovered by the literary community. Alice Walker, we read her, of course, the first week in class. She wrote In Search for a Mother's Gardens, um, as well as many other famous works. She largely propelled this recovery of Zora Neale Hurston's works. Quote, this is from the anthology, or no, it's not from the anthology. This is from the Zora Neale Hurston website. quote, originally published in 1937, Their Eyes Were Watching God met significant commercial but divided critical acclaim. Somewhat forgotten after her death, Zora Neale Hurston was rediscovered by a number of Black authors in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and reintroduced to a greater readership by Alice Walker in her 1972 essay, quote, In Search of Zora Neale Hurston, unquote, written for Ms. Magazine. Long out of print, the book was reissued after a petition was circulated in the Modern Language Association convention in 1975. And nearly three decades later, Their Eyes Were Watching God is considered a seminal novel of American fiction. Interestingly, she called um, her essay In Search of Zora Neale Hurston, reminiscent of In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, that she had written, Alice Walker. And also reminiscent of Kate Chopin. Remember, Kate Chopin did not have critical acclaim with The Awakening. In fact, she went into obscurity after that, and she died not soon after that. And people did not read her work. She did not come back into critical acclaim until the late 1960s, just like Zora Neale Hurston here. They have, very similar fates, although Zora Neale Hurston continued to live a lot longer, and had to take other jobs as not a writer, So it's very sad that, she could have been writing that whole time, and makes you wonder what we could have had from her, had she been more accepted and recognized for her talent then. The play Mulebone that Zora Neale Hurston wrote with Langston Hughes was later staged on Broadway posthumously in 1991. So posthumously again means after she died. So after she died, she had written this play, Mulebone, with Langston Hughes, and it was performed on Broadway in 1991. Although the play did not have a long run, it was performed as more of a historical artifact because Hurston and Hughes never finished their collaboration after the two fell out over artistic differences. So it was nice that it still saw the light of day and was actually performed on Broadway. About Their Eyes Were Watching God, Alice Walker asserts, quote, no book more important to me than this one, unquote. That is from the HarperCollins website with a specific piece on Their Eyes Were Watching God. Walker even went so far as to track down and mark Hurston's otherwise unmarked grave in a snake-ridden Florida swamp. PBS has now made a movie on Zora's life, and Oprah Winfrey even made a movie of Their Eyes Were Watching God with Oscar award-winning actress Halle Berry starring as Janie, the protagonist. Winfrey calls Their Eyes Were Watching God her quote, favorite love story of all time, unquote. And that is from the Zora Neale Hurston website, that quote. Combining both of Hurston's seeming life passions, Their Eyes Were Watching God is both a literary and an anthropological achievement. In the novel, Hurston painstakingly recreates both the language and the dynamic of the unique African American community where she grew up in Eatonville. Hurston ransacked the language, the King's English, as well as Eatonville's Ebonics, to achieve, and this is a quote, quote, Hurston ransacked the language, the King's English, as well as Eatonville's Ebonics, to achieve a precision of expression that was stunning. For more than 15 years, through her previous books, as well as numerous short stories and plays, the author has been working to capture in words the beauty and the complexity of her Eatonville experience and of the rural, self-educated Black folks who'd been her neighbors there, unquote. That is also a quote from the Zora Neale Hurston website, so that one is quite full of interesting tidbits and little gems and jewels. So I leave you to Zora Neale Hurston, Her Life and Times, to read in the anthology. You can also check out those links in the written out lecture, and I leave you to the work of hers that we read this week, the nonfiction essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me. Enjoy.